Good morning, members. Welcome to the first meeting of the Enabling and Customer Services Committee. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Turning to the first item to be considered this morning is the appointment of chair. As there is no chair at this point, council having deferred appointment of chair. Councillor Hislop.
Could I nominate Councillor Hagman, please?
Could I second that, please?
Are there any other nominations? No, I can't see anyone indicating online either. So, Councillor Hagman, can we invite you to take the chair? Thank you.
Nick, can I just suggest we take 5 minutes just so I can get chair notes in green paper so they're accessible for me, please? Thank you. Can I get the chair's notes in green paper so they're accessible to me?
Yep, give me 5 minutes and I'll get that sorted for you. Thank you.
Thank you, members. So, good morning, and just to confirm that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, and if you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep a track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we will deal with business in our usual efficient manner. So item 2 is the SEDR and apologies and the Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick, can you provide the SEDR and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have 9 members present in the hall. We have 11 members present on Teams, those being Councillor Ian Carruthers and Councillors Ferguson, Giusti, Howie, Ingalls, Jordan, McCammon, McFarlane, McGregor, Marsh, Scobie, and we have 1 member not present at the start of the meeting, being Councillor Dashper.
Thank you, Nick. And I can confirm I'm happy to approve members' remote participation. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection they wish to make? I'm not seeing any hands up in the room. As Chair, I'll just make a statement of connection just because we are dealing with financial issues that I am the Coslive Resources spokesperson, but it is just a statement of connection. Thank you. Okay, item 4 is the Council Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 24-25 for the period ending the 30th of June 24. Members are provided with an overview of the Council's overall financial performance for the first quarter of the current financial year. This includes the financial pressures anticipated, including the impacts of pay and non-pay inflationary pressures. Gillian Ross is here to assist if members have any questions, so I'll open up the meeting to members' debate. Councillor Stitt.
Thank you, Chair. It's page 13, Appendix 4.10. It says funding available for further requirements, for example, insurance or food. Was that in there because of possibility of P67 meals, or is it just for other things, Gillian?
Thank you. Just to advise that the reference to insurance was an anomaly in that I hadn't anticipated the insurance retender to be through by the time. So the details in Appendix 2 actually include an allocation for insurance. So the amounts that are included within there at the moment exclude just food, and that's in relation to price inflation for food, primarily in relation to school meals, which is where we envisage that. So costs at the moment are still increasing. We keep an eye on those in terms of the average cost per meal, and at the end of the year we'll allocate those resources in line with the increased costs that have been incurred in terms of the supply of school meals.
Do you wish to come back?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gillian.
Thank you. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to social work, the overspend in there. Now, my reading of this is that we're £5 million overspent because we haven't used the £3 million for the work that was meant to be done. And it says here that the forecast expenditure in this area is 1.923 above the enhanced resources. So is that the 3 million included in that or not? And the other one is, when we go to 4.18, it says net overspend of 853. Does that include the 3 million? And if it does that mean we're lying out 4.2 million just now?
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Just to confirm, it's maybe the way that I've written the details within the report. The overall resources of 3.135 included a number of mechanisms or additional support, including additional mitigation measures that would be progressed by the service in relation to enhancements for additional foster carers and additional kind of works in relation to that. The uptake in relation to those elements in terms of that additional investment has been a bit slower than anticipated. So we've got an underspend on those specific allocations, which is offsetting the increased spend that we've got in relation to children's residential placements. So the 1.9 million is that we are 1.9 million pounds beyond what we anticipated for children's residential placements, and that's because we've currently got 28 children in place rather than the forecast position of 21 by the end of the financial year. So that's the additional cost associated with those children at the moment. However, what we're saying is, because we haven't progressed some of the mitigation as much as we had anticipated, and because there are other areas of underspend within the social work budget, primarily in relation to vacancies associated with the challenges in terms of recruitment for social workers at the moment, and some additional income that they were anticipating in relation to asylum seekers, that the net overspend position for social work services at the end of the year will be 853. So that will be 853 on top of the £3.1 million additional investment we've put in this year. So you're correct in that the overall spend will be £4 million in excess of what it was last year, but the overspend is 853.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. So I've got Councillor McFarlane online and then Councillor Johnson in the room here.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is about the authorisation levels that we have in Appendix 5. And if we look at, just following on from Councillor from Ivor's point, sorry, social work services, we've got the Service Director of Social Work who is authorised to pay up to £1 million according to that. Head of Children and Families and Justice Services, £500,000. Social Work Services Manager, £500,000. Public Protection Manager, 100,000, etc. At what point would that come back to full council? Because £1 million does seem like a heck of a lot of money to be delegated without full council having oversight of that. And if the Service Director of Social Work isn't available, and someone is deputising for them, do they carry the same authority? And where you have Head of Children, Families and Justice Services being allowed to authorise up to £500,000, can they do that without checking with the CSWO, or do they have to run it through? I just find it a little bit confusing as to number of different numbers, different levels, and then of course you've got the budget holders and non-budget holders, and how can a non-budget holder authorise spending, etc. So if you could talk us through that, that'd be very helpful.
Thank you. The details in relation to the Council's authorisation structure were reported up to the FPT Committee about 2 years ago, and that was implemented as part of the FPT implementation plan that was approved, and in light of the improvements and changes that we needed to make in terms of increasing financial responsibility with budget holders. Those details are also reflected in our financial codes, and we basically set out within there that each director has a limit up to £1 million, with each what was head of service area then having up to £500,000. So that's the restriction area, and then each manager being able to report up to a maximum of £100,000, and then each manager below that having a responsibility up to £20,000. So that's what we have previously agreed in terms of the Council's authorisation structure in terms of the limits. And it's intended to be like an escalation process, whereby if you are signing off a contract that is in excess of that, you need to then seek further approval from the manager or the authorisation level beyond that. These levels are deemed to be probably quite strict in terms of we try and minimise the extent to which authorisers have that limit to try and improve the overall financial reliability or risk to the council. A number of the council's contracts are quite significant in terms of the budget areas, so £1 million when you're approving spend for a package, you know, it is reasonable, and we try and align those in relation to that. So they are in relation to those current approved levels that are already within there. I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but I'm happy to take any further elements in relation to that.
Would you like to come back, Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, please, thanks. So I'm not sure if you answered the question about if the CSWO, for example, wasn't available and someone is deputising, do they get that authority, or do they still have their own authority, which was clearly half the amount or what have you?
Sorry, yes, apologies. So when an individual is off on annual leave, they can request alternative escalation processes. Sometimes that is referred to another director rather than an escalation within the service. But in some cases, you can apply a temporary increase to those authorisation levels should an individual be off over an extended period of time that would impact our ability to pay or progress with significant service issues. Those are undertaken on a short-term basis, so it would be for a period of 7 days or specific instances such as that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. And I think perhaps the report that was agreed by FPT 2 years ago, if that could maybe be shared with members, that might offer some more clarity, because it's not been included in the background papers to the report today. If that could be taken as an action. Thank you. Councillor Johnson, I've got you next, and followed by Councillor Dorward and Councillor Ferguson online.
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 17, 4.34. It's taking money from the Change Fund to fund the spend to save. And has somebody got a microphone or so? Hearing a bit of feedback. No, we're okay. The figure in here from the borrowing cost, is that, I presume that's net borrowing cost, because the monies from the Change Fund surely should be attracted in some form. I'll just continue because I've got another thing. Now, it's really welcome. This 528,000 per annum saving is just the very things that we really need to be pursuing to try and bring our budget on track. So I very much welcome this, and wonder if are we continuing to pursue this and look for other opportunities in that field, because it looks like a very sensible way to proceed. But like I say, is the interest, is it net or is it gross?
Thank you. So the interest figure is that was detailed in the original report that went to FPT committee in February, I think it was, in relation to the energy efficiency. So effectively that's the annual cost of borrowing for the overall investment requirements that were set out within there. And because we are now proposing that will not come from borrowing and we will fund it from the Change Fund, what I'm indicating there is you can now forgo those borrowing costs, and the savings will be maximised at the 528,000 per annum. Within the report that we previously highlighted, we'd said that would be netted off, and so the overall savings would only be in the region of 300,000. So what we're saying is, by taking the resources from the Change Fund, that will increase those savings up to 528, and we can then bring those forward as part of the overall energy efficiency measures that will come forward as part of the budget development process. Now, we do have 350,000 in terms of the current year in relation to energy efficiency measures, which are reported in the appendix, and we're indicating within there that those are fully delivered, and part of that is associated with the first year of the implementation of these measures. But what we will do at the end of the year is look at our overall consumption levels, and then we'll be able to confirm the extent of increase that we'll be able to then reflect within the budget development process for 25-26, and that will come through that process there as well. In terms of your second question in relation to looking at additional opportunities, that is certainly something that we are engaging with services in relation to looking for further opportunities for any spend to save type initiatives that we can have. So not just limited to energy efficiency, but wider across any other areas such as the fleet estate.
Thank you. Councillor Dorward, I'll come to you next, please.
Good morning, members, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. It's actually quite stark. We're only in the first quarter and we're already looking at cuts to budgets and looking at actually going into non-recurring funding, which is finite in its very nature. Folk have already spoken about residential care. Social work, we've got issues with homelessness at 4.19 on page 15, and we're going to use non-recurring funding for that. We're going into IGB on page 16 at 425, a 1.6 million overspend already for care at home contracts. This is not blaming thing, I'm just pointing it out. It's quite stark, it's quite worrying. And again, the IGB will be looking at using non-recurring resources from the social care fund. Now, non-recurring resources are finite. So, and what we've spoken about collectively at this committee already is our most vulnerable citizens being hit by these, I would say, cuts as opposed to savings in budgets. I would call them cuts. Is there any appetite from this committee and or the administration to go back to Scottish Government and ask them for additional funding? Because we're only at quarter one here, we're looking at massive cuts to our budget. And that's concerning because it's hitting the most vulnerable citizens in Dumfries and Galloway. So I would ask the question, not particularly of officers, but just for members to think about, is there an appetite to go back to Scottish Government? Is there a way of going back to Scottish Government? Perhaps ask that question of officers and asking for additional funding because we need it. And is there an appetite for this administration and other elected members to do so? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. I appreciate that the question was to the committee with any comments from officials. Certainly at the start of the committee I made a statement of connection as resources spokesperson for COSLA, and certainly I can confirm that every month there is an update and a financial update to COSLA leaders. Should there be an appetite collectively from local government to go back to Scottish Government, that would be the forum to do so. But I'll maybe turn to the Director or the Executive Director to make any comment from an official's point of view. Thanks.
I think a couple of points, Councillor Dorward. Obviously, in terms of members, if members wish to either write to a CAB secretary or something similar, or indeed through COSLA, I think it would be a matter for members to consider today, and obviously officers will give support to the chair to prepare that, or the leader, depending on how members decided to convey that message. That would be a matter for members. In terms of the financial position the council's in, and I think it's mirrored across all other 31 councils in Scotland at present in terms of the financial challenges, and Gillian's gave some reflection there in some of the pay and non-pay pressures we're experiencing, but we're not unique in that as well. So certainly money is tight and the financial budgets are very pressured at the moment, and there's a huge demand out there for service from quite a lot of vulnerable people.
Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair. Can I move then that the Chair writes to Scottish Government on behalf of this administration, this council, and ask that they look at additional funding for Dumfries and Galloway Council specifically in terms of what we've just heard this morning in terms of our revenue budget. Thank you.
I'm happy to second that, thank you.
There we have got a seconder. Councillor Hislop, do you want to come in?
Just out of curiosity, is that the current chair or is that the one that will be appointed after the October meeting as the substantive chair? I'm happy with either. It might be as well if the leader of the council was also a signature of that letter, it might help as well.
I'm happy to have additional signatories, Councillor Hislop, but I think the current chair who's in position at the moment, because this committee is making the decision, if that's the way that the decision goes, and the leader can also co-sign, not a problem. Thank you.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. Is it, given your position on COSLA, do you think it would be appropriate for you to write that letter?
So I'm quite happy to confirm that as COSLA spokesperson, I am indeed that as spokesperson. I'm not giving a personal opinion. I get my direction from council leaders across Scotland, all 32 local authority leaders. Today, I've been appointed the chair of the committee today, so if the will of the committee is that I write, I'm aware that one of the other committees, I believe there was a letter coming from the chair, and I believe the leader was perhaps going to be sending that. So I would maybe turn for governance advice on what is the best course of action. But, you know, I think as elected members, we all have various hats that we wear in various guises, whether it's our community councils, whether it's as administration or opposition members. Ultimately, we're here to serve the members of public across Dumfries and Galloway. So I'm happy to put my name to that letter if that's the request of the committee. But I'll maybe turn to Nick for some advice, governance.
Thank you, Chair. No specific governance advice, essentially. If it is the will of members that they would prefer both the Chair and the leader to sign said piece of correspondence, that's perfectly in order, as would be the approach if you took the opposite view and just simply had the Chair sign it. So it's really a matter for members. There is no, there's no specific governance advice on that matter.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up. And I think actually again that, there's a, and there's, to make it more urgent, I think it would probably be beneficial if this was done sooner rather than later. So I think Councillor Hagman would be ideal to sign the letter.
I've got Councillor Ferguson online and then Councillor Thompson to come in. So Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thanks very much. That last bit of discussion there, I don't think we can just write to the Scottish Government. We have to write to Westminster because the money the Scottish Government get comes from Westminster. So they've got a finite budget, the same as us. So I would probably ask that we amend that to include right to both the Scottish and the UK governments. That's just come up. That wasn't the reason I had my hand up. There's a couple of questions on the Appendix 5. And I'm sure if it's the right place, or maybe we need to take it outside the meeting here, but I suppose the first thing to clarify is this structure here with the blue and different colours being budget holders, not a budget holder. It doesn't really make much sense to me, because if you look at the nursery, primary and secondary education, for example, on page 32, head teachers, stroke teachers, 126 of them have a budget of up between 20 and 50,000, and they are budget holders. Then you go down to principal, to page 33, and then you've got principal teachers, care, experienced education team, education officers can spend sub 5,000, 20,000, and I appreciate that this is just for indicative purposes for us, but it seems an awful difference. And you could be a head teacher at a small primary school. Does that mean you've got a budget of 20,000 that you can spend without any authorisation? Yet a principal teacher with more kids under their care can only spend up to 5,000, and there's just so many anomalies here. And I suppose maybe this is my experience, because I wasn't an FPT the last time round. Where was this whole grading system and budget setting system approved? Which committee approved it? That's the first question. And then in terms of job evaluation, how many have moved from being budget holders to looking after a budget, which is a subtle thing, and it's a job evaluation thing. It's misleading, and we could do some more narrative on this. I'm just wondering if we can get any comment, just basically on that. And I think for me the big thing though, it's the impact on the staff, where the grading might have had a negative impact, which would have meant they would have been potentially not had the same job evaluation score, which could have affected their salary. And it looks a bit ad hoc to me. I'd just like a bit more information or advice about actually how we came to this massive appendix, and which committee authorised it.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Gillian?
Thank you. As indicated by Councillor Hagman earlier, I appreciate the confusion that's maybe caused by this. So we will circulate the previous paper that set out in a lot more detail the principles and approach that was taken in relation to the implementation of the authorisation structure. In relation to the specific amounts, as indicated previously, we've set those within the financial codes in terms of maximum values for each individual based on their current post holder, but we also engage with each of the services, and these are approved by the directors and the management teams in terms of the overall. It does take into account the size of the budgets that are available within each of those. So some budget holders may have a predominantly staff-focused budget with very little discretionary spend. So if that's the case, they do tend to have quite a lower level of budget authorisation level to take into recognition of the likely transactions that they will incur on a day-to-day basis. It is tended to reflect a restriction on that as much as possible and reflect day-to-day activities. So different jobs of a same banding may have different authorisation levels because their day-to-day activities can be significantly different across services and functions. Within schools, obviously there's quite limited availability of resources under the discretionary resources, so the amounts of 20 to 50,000 in terms of what a head teacher or can commit to is quite restricted in relation to that. So I'm happy to share, as indicated the previous report, which goes into a lot more detail in terms of the overall principles that were established in relation to the implementation of this authorisation structure.
I'll just bring the director in as well, if I may. Thanks.
Just in response to the points, I think, around job evaluation, obviously any job evaluation processes take account of the financial regulations, budget as one of the factors within the job evaluation system, Councillor Ferguson, so that evidence is available for reference there as well. So I'm not aware of any changes to anyone's banding or grading as a result of us, I suppose, codifying more appropriately a couple of years ago around the delegations in terms of spend. I don't think Gillian's aware of anyone either, so certainly to give you assurance we're not aware of any changes there, but certainly happy to pick up offline if there's any other specific concerns that have been identified from yourself.
Thank you. Does that answer your point there, Councillor Ferguson?
Well, it's 2.6 of the recommendations, actually. It's asking us to note the updated authorisation hierarchy. The question I'm asking is, was that, are we in fact by default agreeing that hierarchy today, right? Or where else was it where else did it's reflecting the agreed council restructure? And I can't remember a paper coming to us with that, all these with Appendix 5 to any committee since we agreed the restructure.
I'll just bring the director back in. Yep.
Yes, so the question is today, are we actually agreeing that Appendix 5, or are we just noting what somebody else has authorised? And I suppose that it's a Vlad question or somebody else. Is it within the delegations of the senior management team, for example, to actually put that in place? Personally, I would think it's such a massive change to the council, is it probably should go back to committee, but that's only my view.
Thank you. I'll bring the director back in now.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. So this committee, or a predecessor of this committee, Finance Procurement Transformation Committee, agreed the authorisation hierarchy at levels within the council, at Chief Officer, Director, Heads of Service, and then specific roles beneath, which are largely the same within this document. The document is simply updating that under the new structure in terms of the new descriptors of the roles. So directors previously had that level of authorisation, and that level of authorisation was codified through a report to this committee, a predecessor committee. So I suppose in a sense that we're updating it for the new structure, but we're not updating the values or the levels. We're simply transferring them across into the new roles. But I take the point there in terms of that trail and prior knowledge of that. And happy to kind of be guided by members how you want to proceed, but certainly those are the levels of the delegations that exist for different levels within the council, and largely are unchanged because it was only the chief officers that moved, and it's simply not increasing or decreasing levels, it's simply transferring them. I hope that explains a bit, but happy again to give further information and through Gillian.
Is that helpful, Councillor Ferguson?
To a degree, yes, but the whole idea of the new structure, and there's things in there, there's a whole raft of questions you would probably ask. It would be interesting what the joint trade unions view was on this. I have to say about the some of the levels, and there are changes. It looks like, and it's a level of responsibility. I'm assuming here. I mean, for example, you've got the head of the youth work services. We've got so many more than some teachers, for example, and yeah, they've got a spending limit the same. To me, I don't see where the equal pay for equal worth is actually coming across here, and I think that's probably my concern. But I think rather than keep this going to be, I'd be happy to take it offline and no doubt Lorna and them can give us the information that we asked for.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And I think we have already noted it down as an action that the existing paper that was agreed and the policy that was agreed would be shared with all members. I think if I may just add in at that point, because we have got a new structure, perhaps all the strategies and policies that relate to this service committee could perhaps be collated and pulled together so all members are aware of essentially the rules that we're working within. But I don't know if that can be added in as an additional action, because obviously there are new members on this committee that may not have sat on the predecessor committees that have now encapsulated as we go forward. But we'll maybe come back to that just to confirm the actions at the end with the recommendations. I'm conscious we've got Councillor Thompson wanting to come in, and then Councillor McFarlane is coming in for a second time, along with Councillor Dorward for a second time. But Councillor Thompson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so it was just around the letter, happy to support, but I think it might be we could take care about how we do it, because I appreciate you're chair for the day, as it were, but not necessarily appointed as a political chair for this committee, so it would be helpful if the political lead for the council signed the letter, because that's maybe the appropriate person. And again, if governance could help with that, that would be helpful. I think that's what we did with the E&I committee, just to recognise that difference, chair for a day and political appointment. So, but by all means, the more signatures, the better, I'm sure. In terms of the letter itself, though, it would be, I think we could probably do better in the sense that I fully welcome the kind of short-term request to both governments. I think there's maybe a medium-term ask, which might be if we can push for 3-year settlements at least, because you know, that's long been a sort of voice from this council, and it would be sort of negligent not to include that in such a letter, given that we're looking at the planning of finances. Similarly, particularly under social work, I mean, homelessness, I think we've already made it a priority through ourselves and our regional strategic partners, that affordable homes in the region is a key priority. So I think we can certainly add that, or if members are happy to include something like that in the letter to reference this report as a recognised risk and pressure under the homelessness part. And then in social work, clearly the cost of the residential placements for a very small number is a very large cost, and it's something that we have to, it's our most vulnerable people, if you like, but I mean, I think there's something that we need to push for nationally to try and get a better solution to that. So asking for more money is fine, but doesn't really solve the underlying problems, and I'd rather the letter was actually saying, can we tackle the underlying problems more strategically with longer term funding settlements, and I think that ties in the UK government, hopefully to provide a 3-year settlement for the Scottish government, which can then provide it to us, which would be very welcome. So if members are happy with that, I'd be happy to go with that, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I mean, certainly there is precedent been set in the past where we have it into both governments. I absolutely take your point insofar that we have a political leadership in place in the council, and I am only here as a temporary chair today. In regards to the 3-year settlement, obviously that's looking ahead rather than where we are currently, but certainly it is an aspiration of both this council, as we've discussed previously, and nationally, and I'm aware that that argument is being made and certainly made to Westminster in terms of Scottish Government budgets. In terms of housing, the affordable housing issue, I understand that a letter was sent to both governments previously back in June, I've been advised, so that has been captured there. But I'm in the hands of the committee going forward. I'm happy to take forward what the will is, but I agree that it would be appropriate to write to both sets of government going forward. Councillor Dorward, your hand is up, so I'll maybe bring you in next, noting that you were the one that proposed the letter in the first place. And Councillor Thompson, if you wanted to come back again, I'll maybe come back to you.
I appreciate that, Chair. Thank you so much. Totally agree that writing to as many folk as possible is useful. However, this is about immediate concerns. I think, what we're concerned about in the Labour Group is the current report. We're in the first quarter already showing a massive shortfall in budgets, which is going to affect the most vulnerable in this area. That's where we're coming from. And actually, it's interesting to note that, and I totally respect Councillor Ferguson's perspective in terms of the UK Government's budget, but the Scottish Government, in terms of their budget, the Scottish Fiscal Commission have said that much of the pressure comes from the Scottish Government's own decisions in terms of budget cuts, and they have little room for manoeuvre now or in the future. That's their issue. If they want to write to the UK Government and ask for more money, that is entirely up to them. I don't think it's within our gift to do that, because the Scottish Government directly funds local government, not the UK Government. So there is a difference there. I'm not overly fussed about it, but I think it's interesting that's always brought in. But it's notable that what the Scottish Fiscal Commission have said is that the Scottish Government is responsible for much of the position it finds itself in at the moment, not the UK Government. So write to both if that's the case, but keep in mind that the Scottish Government has the responsibility to fund local authorities in this country, not the UK Government. I think that's really, should be noted. And I don't think we should be really moving on long-term budgets at the moment. I don't think we should be, I think the motion is concerned with the funding, we have the revenue funding for this year. I totally appreciate the perspective on long-term budgets. We've mentioned that quite a lot. It's the best way to go, but it's not happening at the moment. It's a separate issue. A separate letter could be done from that perspective at a different time. But I think from the motion that we've raised, it's effectively about the revenue funding that we have at the moment and the fact that we've got so many cuts to the budget that are affecting the most vulnerable in this community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Certainly, I mean, that's more a statement rather than any question going forward. So I think it would be maybe useful just to capture what the motion is. You've got your motion and secretary. We've had quite a debate on whether we're writing to Westminster, whether it's coming from the political leadership or not. But Councillor Thompson, I did say I would come back to you. I'd also note that Councillor McFarlane, you've put your hand down, so I'm assuming you don't want to come in any longer. But Councillor Thompson, I did say I would come back to you, so I'll come back to you just now, please.
No, thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Listening to the contributions, it's very clear and welcome that the Labour Group's raising this from their perspective, but I think as a committee, we can be a bit more inclusive than that and recognise those elements, which I'm sure many of us agree with anyway, in terms of the immediate pressures that are being described here. But on the flip side, this report, and I know there's reports going to social work to articulate how they might try and deal with those challenges, even though there's a high risk that there's going to be extreme funding pressures. But I think we have to maybe be a bit more savvy about how we couch our letters, so that we can at least say there is a short-term issue or risk that we want to identify and address. And but we have to also, I think, accept that there is a context within which we're working, and I think it wouldn't do any harm to include that, so that we kind of give the best representation from across the council members represented here. So it's not just a motion from one group getting taken forward, it's like a motion led by maybe one group, but then other people are able to come in and add to that to strengthen it on behalf of the whole council, or this committee at least through the political lead. So I'd rather include those things so that we can at least place them in a context that frames the challenges that we're facing this year. And I totally accept that it is, you know, the bulk of our funding comes from the Scottish Government, but there are elements that come from elsewhere, and while that's not what we're talking about today, this report isn't really talking about that either. I think it's just highlighting certain risks. So I think this is a good opportunity to write a letter that can include the will of this whole committee, not just individual groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So I think just in terms of adding in an additional recommendation, clearly I'm hearing that the committee is wanting a letter to be written, acknowledging the comments about inclusivity and the two governments. I mean, I would just point out that the report we're looking at is actually for the period ending the 30th of June. We've actually got a new government in Westminster since this report has gone up to. I would be content to write to both governments. I'm also content that we include the leader in that letter. I'm happy to put my name to that. If the committee is happy to take that forward, I'll maybe just come back to Councillor Dorward, who raised this as a motion, but certainly I would think it is important that we take on the inclusive nature of this and we actually capture the whole committee as well. So Councillor Dorward, are you happy with that going forward?
If it's the collective will of the committee, I think that's the way forward. But I think it must be noted that we're absolutely, I think the importance of the initial bit of the motion is vital. We are actually in an emergency here, I would say, in terms of funding. And that's going to, we're coming into winter, you wouldn't think so today, which is a lovely day, but it's been increasingly cold. We're coming into winter and we've got a lot of vulnerable citizens who, according to this report, are going to be less well off, shall we say, with the budget cuts. So this is actually an emergency. So that's I think that should be the thrust of the communication, and it's particularly with Scottish Government, although I don't have a problem with writing to the UK Government at the same time, but I think we should also recommend Scottish Government do that too. But if it's the will of the committee, I'm happy to go with that in terms of inclusiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands up on that one, so we will take that as an action going forward, and certainly we'll make sure that the letter is shared with all members of the committee once that has been sent. So if there's no other comments or questions, we will turn to the recommendations. So we're being asked to note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. We're being asked to agree 2.4, which is the residual 25-26 investment requirement of 1.555 million to deliver the agreed energy efficient measures is funded from the Change Fund to maximise savings in the upcoming financial year as reflected in paragraph 4.34. And we're being asked to note 2.5 and 2.6. So are members happy to agree and note those? Thank you. And just in terms of actions, we'll ensure that the delegated authority spend policy that we have discussed will be circulated, and consideration also given to sharing all the strategies and policies that sit, I think would also be helpful. Okay, moving on to item 5. This is the capital investment strategy monitoring. Oh, apologies, sorry. The additional recommendation is also to write that later. So we'll put that down as 2.7. to ensure that that gets captured. Thank you. So, Capital Investment Strategy Monitoring Report for 24-25 in the Q1 is the report by the Interim Deputy Chief Financial Officer. This report provides members with an update on the agreed 10-year capital investment strategy and an overview of the financial progress of the capital programme for the current financial year based on the position at the 30th of June 24. We've got Karen Donaldson here to assist if members have any questions, and I'll open the meeting up to member debate. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. No issues with the recommendations per se. But a question about Borderlands funding development costs from local authority capital. Again, no issues with that in principle. It's more, again, a guarantee that we're putting additional money into this, and that's great for the people of Stranraer, good for the west of the region. No problems with that. What I would ask is perhaps it's not contained in the report per se, is the money from Scottish Government, UK Government guaranteed? Because we're putting a lot of our money into this to develop it, and that's right and proper, that's been what's agreed, but do we have a guarantee that we'll get the money back for Stranraer, which is really important for the west of the region, if we are agreeing to put this additional funding in? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dorwood. So, with regards to the Borderlands funding, there is a memorandum of understanding. The overall Borderlands growth deal has been signed by both governments and the partner councils. So, from that point of view, there is that guarantee of funding there. What needs to happen is the initial development costs of the projects up to the point where full business cases are developed need to be covered by the sort of sponsoring authority. So, with regards to the marina, we need to get to the point of full business case sign-off by government and the Borderlands Partnership Board that then unlocks the full funding for the project. So basically what this asks in this report is basically saying there's some additional pieces of work that need to be done with regards to ground investigation and some site works to enable the detail to be developed for the full business case, and the expectation is that the full business case for the marina will be ready towards the end of this financial year, and hopefully we'll have sign off either towards the end of this financial year or early next financial year is the current timescale. So yeah, I don't think there's any risk to the overall Borderlands funding, that there is that agreement in place.
Does that help?
Yes, it does, Chair. Thank you for that explanation. I think it's just to have an assurance. Again, totally agree with the recommendations. The west of the region deserves this additional investment, but it's just to make sure. I know the agreement's been signed off. We have had some changes in terms of government spending plans, etc. So it might be useful to make sure that is in place from both governments, because what we don't want is any change to that in the light of the current financial climate. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Johnson next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's on the Stranraer Marina and the development of the business case. And my understanding is this has actually become a bit of a matter of urgency, because there is potential to jeopardise the Marine Research Centre project as part of that whole waterfront if we don't get this business case developed in a timely manner. So I would welcome accelerating expenditure, and I'd like a bit of reassurance that it will be completed at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Are we able to offer some reassurance?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just we need this further budget approval, and as you rightly said, there is some urgency around this, particularly around the ground investigation works, that there's a sort of window before, we need to get it done before sort of winter sets in. There is a window where we're able to do this, and if the ground investigations aren't done, then it could delay the sign-off of the full business case. So absolutely, there is urgency around this, but I've been assured that the team are ready to procure the work as soon as budget approval has been provided.
Thank you. I think that is welcome news to everybody on the committee. I'm not seeing... Oh, no, I do apologise. Councillor Ferguson, your hand is up. I'll come to you. And then I've got Councillor Thompson in the room, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I asked this question at the pre-meet, and I just wanted to do it again just now, so it's on the record. It was just confirmation from the Director what training, for example, would be for new members of this committee, so they can understand the intricacies of some of the more difficult, let's put it that way, things to understand if you've not got a financial background, for example. So just if we could get on record exactly what we're doing to make sure the members are competent enough to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring the Director in, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. So members will be aware that there is a training seminar next week on Treasury Management, and to reconfirm that we will look towards rerunning previously delivered training around budget, financial reporting, and financial regulations and similar, and also the capital investment strategy, which I think is the point you'd raised earlier as well. So we'll look towards that programme over the next period, and obviously diary permitting for members as well.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks very much. Thanks, Director.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, did I see your hand up to come in? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was actually on the appendices, so from page 65 onwards, and it's really just about a couple of figures in there. So on Appendix 1, there's a total capital investment figure of 72,517 as agreed investment strategy. And then and it's really just to maybe help my understanding, but on the second appendix on page 67, it's got the total capital programme as 71, and this is under a revised total budget allocated 71,547. And then on Appendix 4, it's got at the top in the estimates of capital expenditure, it's got, I'm just wondering if the figures are the right way around or if I've just picked it up wrong. It's the estimate per strategy 72,517, which is the sort of front cover one, and then the estimate for Q1 monitoring 71,547. I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two of those and what accounts for that. Thank you.
I'll come to Karen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I can confirm that the 24-25 planned capital investment strategy spend when the budget was approved in February was the 72,517, and that's what our initial sort of treasury strategy was based on. But the annex or note 1 to appendix 1, I'm not sure what page number that's on the papers.
65.
65. Sort of reconciles how we've moved from the 72,517 per the strategy to the 71,547. That's the planned spend for this year now. So basically what we're saying is the planned spend for the capital investment strategy for this year is now 71,547, and that's what we'll be monitoring against going forward. So again, that note to Appendix 1 sort of reconciles the changes from what members approved at full council in February to now.
Do you wish to come back?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So, I mean, obviously that's following along the table there to the column 9, I suppose it would be. But so what difference is that? So obviously if there's a difference in our, because that might have a difference in our borrowing or whatever, so I'm just sort of wondering in terms of that, does that have an effect on revenue savings or does it have any other impact elsewhere? Thank you.
As I've highlighted in the report, the adjustments made only reflect the overall, there's no, like the overall sort of time and a spend across the 10-year programme. So overall, within the 10-year programme, there will be no change to the overall borrowing required. There will be slight changes year on year, but again, we're not expecting, given the very minor amount overall, we're not expecting any significant increase to loan charges or borrowing costs as a result of that.
Councillor Thompson.
No, thanks for that. I appreciate that, and I think I understand that. I think, but it took my sort of addled brain a bit of work trying to sort of get my head around that, and I'm just wondering for the benefit of, and I appreciate there's new members on this new committee as well, but I don't know, I think we're probably full of our seminars in the calendar, but it might be helpful to get, in the same way as pension subcommittee, for example, gets a bit of specific training around understanding these. It might be helpful to have some kind of something that actually gets us interactively involved with how we understand this, because I think that, you know, the 4 appendices seem to contain a lot of similar information, but actually they're very specific about what they're relating to. And for the average person, I'm not saying that I'm average particularly, but for anybody, I think it might be helpful. I don't know if that's something that could be picked up either out with this meeting or for members of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think there has been assurance given by the Director on the training and seminars that are in place, but I think it is also important to stress to members of the committee, while it's not mandatory, it would be highly recommended, some of the training, because I appreciate the comments that have been said that not all members will attend seminars, but they are also uploaded to the Teams portal, so all members can then view them at a later stage as well. So that's a really helpful resource for the committee. I've got Councillor Scobie online, followed by Councillor Slater. So Councillor Scobie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just ask if we could go back to the Borderlands growth deal, particularly the Stranraer Marina, and thank Councillors Dorwood and Johnson for their introduction to this issue. There is a degree of urgency required in this case, and it feels like we've had years upon years of ground investigation at Stranraer, can date back to Wigton District Council when they were looking at siting their swimming pool on this particular site, and did a massive amount of groundwork or ground investigation. So there is this, again, expectation from the people of Stranraer that the project will start in 2025. So that's the degree of urgency that's required. And I would hope that this committee is kept up to speed with the progress being made in terms of the business case being produced and submitted, and just that the expectation of it starting in 2025 with shovels on the ground is brought about so that the people can see some development on the waterfront. This still doesn't deal with the issue of the East Pier. It's out with the East Pier. It's more to the water side, but we still have this carbuncle of the East Pier and how we deal with that. But in this regard, I would ask that we kept up to speed with the progress being made in the business case, and that we would still be in target for a start date of 2025 for the marina. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie, and certainly we will continue to receive monitoring reports, but I'll maybe just turn to Karen to confirm the details on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate the members' request for updates. However, I just want to highlight that this report is designed to be a financial progress report, and the detail around the progress of projects is reported through, and particularly for the Borderlands projects, through Economy and Infrastructure Committee. So that would be the committee that would be getting the detail around progress and timescales. This report is designed to just give a kind of high-level overview of the sort of financial monitoring of the programme rather than the specifics on individual projects.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back, Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, please. And I'm grateful for the explanation there from Harvey. But I would hope that the two committees will link in with each other, that we can see both the practical side and the progress being made there alongside the financial implications of this in moving forward, so that, you know, we are one council. So I would hope that two will work together and we do get the progress from both sides, both financially and the practical ramifications of moving forward, again with the expectation of this project starting in 2025 with shovels on the ground.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. I think that assurance has been given, and I would just maybe add in that certainly from an area committee, any project reports also gets updated at that level as well. But certainly I think the assurance has been given in terms of the financial strategy, and for the actual project to be reported through Economy and Environment Committee. I'm just checking I've got the right name for that one, but I think the assurance has been given. Yes, I've got Infrastructure and Environment. We'll get there. But yes, thank you, Councillor Scobie. Councillor Slater, I'll come to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a question for Karen. At the 71.547 million, what do you put in for overspend, percentage-wise, or underspend on a project this size? As regards percentage, if it runs over, what do you have a percentage that you would probably look to? If it does run over, where would you think that should be? That's what I'm asking, if you could explain that. Thank you.
Thank you. With regards to priority projects, we try and ask officers to they build in a sort of risk allowance for unknowns, and that's depending on sort of the stage of the project. So there's no overall sort of percentage included for underspends or overspends per se. You'll notice as part of the Appendix 2 that we do have an overall allowance of £4 million in for slippage in the programme, and that's kind of been added in from a financial perspective, recognising that we've got a very ambitious capital programme this year and that we have experienced slippage in the capital programme over recent years due to a variety of different things, including sort of resource and availability of materials. So I've sort of built in an estimate of where I think things might slip rather than maybe overspends. However, like in relation to the asset classes as well, the service committees are able to alter spending year by 10% without needing to come back through to this committee. So the service committees do have a sort of 10% sort of movement allowance within the asset classes, but anything in relation to sort of priority projects, if there was going to be an overspend, that would need to come through either this committee or full council. But again, at the moment, like there is risk allowances built into projects that are not yet tendered. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I'm not seeing any hands up in the room or online, so let's move to the recommendations. So we are being asked to note 2.1, 2.2, agree 2.3, which is the updated development costs, and note 2.4. So are members happy to note and agree those recommendations? Thank you. Item 6 is our annual Treasury Management Report for 23-24, and this is to ensure compliance with the reporting requirements set out in the SITFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management. Members are presented with an annual report on Treasury Management activities in comparison to the intended strategy. Karen Donaldson is here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open up the meeting to debate. Councillor McFarlane, I'll come to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Amongst the recommendations is a comment resulting in a net debt of 147 million, etc. And then under 4.2, we talk about actual net external debt. And on 4.5, we talk about level of gross external debt. Can you explain to me why we're mixing those different terms and what the difference is and what it means? Thanks.
Okay, no, thank you for your question. So obviously the gross external debt is the total debt of the council. However, like for the prudential indicators and that, we need to look at the net position. So basically that takes off the net position takes off any cash balances the council has in bank accounts, etc. So to get so basically what we're saying is the net debt position, so basically the actual borrowing less the cash the council had at the bank at the end of March 2024 was £147.8 million. But the actual loans and borrowing the council had was the £169 million. So the sort of table at the top of page 74 kind of outlines that we had total debt of 169 million, but then we've got sort of £22 million cash at bank at the time in the bank accounts, which gave a net debt position of 147.8 million. So hopefully that table there kind of outlines the differences between the two figures.
Does that help, Councillor McFarlane?
Yes, thank you. It was just, as I said, the use that wasn't clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ferguson next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Karen, I'm just looking at page 83 and 84, and we've got significant amounts of money going into other local authorities, it looks like. Can maybe explain that a bit more to me, because I mean, I don't know for certain, but if I read the news correctly, Birmingham, which is one of them, is actually in administration. So how secure is our money when it goes to maybe a better question actually is, particularly overnight deposits, how do we risk assess? Who actually does that risk assessment, and are we covered by any indemnity if it goes pear-shaped? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, so in relation to borrowing to other local authorities, we decide on that based on the sort of like how the rates compare to the Debt Management Office. So in the actual Treasury strategy itself, it outlines the sort of the different tiers depending on risk and how much we're allowed to borrow with each body. So the Debt Management Office is fully run by government, so it is seen as the most secure. So that's always our first port of call. However, the sort of second thing we would look at is other local authorities, because obviously local authorities by their nature are all government backed as well. And I appreciate we did for a time, although it has now been, it was repaid in February. We did have a deposit out with Birmingham City Council. That all councils are backed by government, so the risk of not getting our money back is very, very low. So we don't see that as being a risk. And obviously, just to confirm that the Birmingham one was repaid on time as per the agreement in February. So obviously it is a matter for the Treasury team to assess the risk, when we always take the approach of the security and liquidity of funds being a priority before investment return. So just be absolutely reassured by that. But the officers in Treasury do have to risk assess each deposit made, and that's done in accordance with the parameters agreed in the Treasury strategy that's agreed at full council in March each year.
Thank you, Karen. Hopefully that offers some reassurance, Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, just one quick thing from Karen. So I'm assuming then that the rate that you get is based upon the risk. Is that a correct assumption?
To an extent, but not always necessarily. I suppose it depends on the cash available. Like government, like the Debt Management Office rate changes day to day, depending on the cash held by government. So it does change. It's not always necessarily risk. It can be driven by the cash balances of all the different bodies as well, and whether they need to lend, or whether if their cash is a bit tighter, they'll reduce the rate so that it's not as attractive, so they won't be paying out. So it is, but again, generally, like higher risk does generate a higher interest. But in terms of what we've done here between local authorities and debt management, it's all government backed, it's all really secure, so it kind of just depends on the market at the time.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I've got Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the report. It's a really good report. Sorry, I've got a sore throat today. Just on page 74, at 4.4, what it says about this effective management of surplus cash has significantly increased the level of investment income being generated. Just think that's really, really good, and can we expect more of the same? Thank you.
And thank you for that. And just to reassure, like we did generate just under £7.5 million in investment income last year. Obviously, as the report shows at the table at the top of page 74, like the cash balances of the council are reducing, and we will likely, the Treasury mid-year report that will come to this committee in November, I'll highlight that we are at a point of having to start to move to borrowing. So whilst like the first half of this year we will have investment income, we are expecting, due to the significant capital investment over the upcoming period, that we will shift to needing to borrow again. So, but yeah, I think it's been quite good time, and we've managed to benefit from the high interest rate while we've had good cash balances. So that's overall a positive outcome, and while we will see that to an extent this year, it will start reducing obviously as the interest rates reduce and our cash balances have significantly reduced as well. So we won't see the £2.5 million, but we're hoping that it'll still be in excess of £1 million this year.
Thank you, Karen. Does that help, Councillor Wilson?
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add also my thanks to the team. We are in a good position. I think that's reflected in the report as highlighted by Councillor Wilson. And just to put on record my thanks to the team for that due diligence and that work that has been done in the background. I think it's absolutely important to note, noting that budgets are going to be difficult, but yeah, we're in a good position. Councillor Slater, I've got you looking to come in now, please.
Yes, sorry, question for Karen. When you're borrowing money, obviously there'll be an interest rate paid back. So if you're borrowing larger amounts, does that bring the interest rate down? Or is it the fact when you borrow money, is it the time factor, the longer you borrow it for, does that lower the interest on the loan? Thank you.
No, thank you. And there can be a slight sort of discount in the rate for borrowing higher amounts, but generally what it's driven by is the duration of the borrowing. It tends to be that like longer term borrowing tends to be at a kind of lower rate on the expectation that over the average, like sort of 50 years, it's saying it maybe be sitting around 5%. Or potentially lower than that in the sort of short term, particularly just now, given the higher interest rates. Like short term borrowing does tend to be more expensive, but the longer term, like the sort of longer term loans, it's sort of looking at maybe more inflation and longer term, obviously like estimates of what inflation and interest rates are going to be. I can't see us getting down as low as the rates we've had over the sort of last 10 to 15 years, but certainly there does seem to be better value with longer term borrowing than there is at short term at the moment with regards to rates.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, either online or in the room. So if we turn to the recommendations, we're being asked to note the contents of the annual Treasury Management Report for 23-24. Are we happy to note? Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Item 7 is Enabling and Customer Services Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 24-25 for the period ending the 30th of June. This report provides members with an overview of the performance against budget for the first quarter of the financial year for the Directorate. And I've got Gillian Ross here to answer any questions, so I shall open up to member debate. I'm not seeing any hands up either in the room or online. I would say that this is a noting report, so we're not being asked to agree anything as such. So if members are content to note the contents of the report, we are noting 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4 as detailed. Are we content? Thank you, members. So, moving on to item 8, this is the ICT Business Systems Asset Class Capital Programme for 24-25 Monitoring Report. Members are presented with the first quarter monitoring report on the ICT Business Systems Asset Class Capital Programme for the current year. And I've got James Pocock, who is here to assist members if they have any questions. So I shall open up again to members' debate. Again, I would state that this is a noting report. And I'm not seeing any hands up either in the room or online. So if we are content to note the recommendations of 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Are we content to note the report as detailed? Thank you, James. Okay, item 9 is the Governance and Human Resources Service Plan for 24-25. And this report presents the service plan for Governance and Human Resources Service for the year. Vlad Valiente is here to assist if any members have any questions. And again, I shall open up to members' debate. Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 130, second top, review of taxi provision. This is a motion that we brought in December last year about taxi accessibility. I just wonder if it's got to be up to date, so we're told on the date it would take about a year. And I just want an update if we're going to be running on time with it. Thank you.
Vlad, are you able to give us an update?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through yourself. The overall kind of taxi provision, which includes the kind of qualities look at and considerations, is currently being consulted upon, and thereafter we'll report that through the right channels, which will be a number of channels in terms of that governance, but it's important that we do that consultation piece first. So we're probably a wee bit behind of where we wanted to be, but it is on. It's ongoing at the moment, and I believe the consultation's out at the moment currently.
No,
Does that help, Councillor Stitt?
No, I know it's fine because we got actually consultation sent to us, and I know that some of the taxi drivers I've spoke to have received the consultation. It just would be nice to get it done and dusted as quick as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Thompson in the room, and I've got Councillor Ferguson got his hand up online. So Councillor Thompson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so it's just on page 132, and it's just around the success measures. On the bit where it's got number of people on flexible working arrangements, so this measures basically that target, but the thing is what it's not necessarily describing is how we ensure we've got a kind of minimum level of cover in terms of customers coming to the council. So I think it'd probably be helpful to get that assurance, and I know it'll be different across different directorates given the sort of way that they work, etc. But you know, it's a common anecdote that as your elected members hear where somebody's tried to get in touch with a member of the council staff in person on a particular day, a Friday afternoon, let's say, and only to find that there's maybe a staffing issue or there's nobody there in person to take their inquiry, so they get maybe kept on hold for ages using the council system or whatever. So now I appreciate that's maybe an anecdote, but what assurance do we get as elected members that you know, management teams are arranging their rotas for staff effectively, so that we've got while internally we're maintaining that flexibility for staff, in terms of the public interface, we've always got somebody as a point of contact so that it's managed effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Vlad.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the kind of smarter working policy, which includes the kind of flexible working element of it, service needs are right at the forefront in terms of that decision making, and in essence puts an onus on the relevant manager or supervisor to ensure service continuity within that. So the assurance I would give is where these type of requests, for example, come to myself, one of the first questions I ask is, do we have cover? What does that look like? And within that, there's a review process that you can have as a manager. So when you're agreeing to any flexible working, you can agree it within a kind of 6-month period and then reviewed before finalising that. That allows an element of piloting to ensure that service continuity element is met. And that's an expectation on all managers to be checking in terms of, one, the policy, service needs, as well as obviously the employee needs within that.
Do you wish to come back?
Yeah, just quickly, thanks through yourself, Chair. So I think what I'm hearing there is that there is an onus, but I suppose, and you've given a verbal assurance, but it's really hard to sort of measure that, I think, from the reports in front of us. So I'm just sort of wondering, is it possible to get that type of breakdown, and is it even appropriate, you know, given that it might be awkward for small departments, but where there is a pressure and elected members come to hear about it, do we then report that to yourself, where you can go back to the manager and sort of remind them of their onus. Or you know, it's really about how are we sort of making sure that we are actually delivering as far as all our customers and citizens are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. I would suggest it would be quite difficult for us to break that down in terms of we don't have that day-to-day management and operational management of all the services within the council. However, what I would suggest in that sort of scenario, I think is members obviously have got a route via that kind of EMES process in terms of asking around that service and that service provision, particularly where you're hearing feedback that there might be some kind of failure to have accessibility for the general public. So that would be the route in terms of that EMES process, because the other consideration for members is that that might not have anything to do with flexible working arrangements. It might have to do with other service provision or other issues within that particular service.
Councillor Thompson, does that answer your question, or are you looking to come back again?
It does on that one. I've got another one, but I appreciate other members might want in, so I'm happy to come back afterwards if that's okay.
Yep, no, that's fine. I'll take Councillor Ferguson as a first-time speaker, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. It's actually on page 125, the resource plan. I see we've started to put things in brackets. Which in my day meant it was a minus, but here it's a plus in terms of fees and charges. Where do we get the fees and charges from, given it's relatively internal? And do we have any internal recharges? And if we do, where do they get accounted for? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Vlad?
Thank you, Chair. Really good question. So in terms of I'll start with the latter first, which is, do we do an internal recharging? And the answer to that is no. I would particularly be opposed to that, and the reason for that is that some of the services that we have are enabling services. The council has invested in their recruitment, and therefore what we want to do is to ensure that early intervention and prevention. And as an example, if a service or an elected member comes to us with a legal issue, we will spend however long it requires in order to address that legal issue, rather than be in essence passing a bill to the relevant service. So we're not recharging, particularly in terms of those enabling type services. We're investing in terms of doing the work with those services and ensuring that they're able to pick up the phone to us. In terms of the overall fees and charges, you'll see within the programme of works that we've got licensing fees that is also coming back to members in due course, and there are other fees that we do charge through legal section in particular, and those relate to work that we do not necessarily have to do, but the council does, relating to certain transactions. For example, you've got planning agreements, you've got sale of land, etc. That obviously there's cost implications to the council in terms of proceeding with that ask, and therefore it's a standard fees that we charge within that.
Thank you, Vlad. Hopefully that covers off all those questions just now. I will turn to Councillor Hislop, please.
Going back to something I asked earlier, which ones of these indicators can you disaggregate for area committees so that we get information that's relevant to that area committee? You know, like days lost per number of staff. That would be a regional wide one because of the size of your thing. But elected members' inquiries dealt with through the EMES, could that be dealt with as Nithsdale members against Stewartry, against Wigton or Annandale Nithsdale? You know, can you disaggregate those to see if the services acting as it should across the region, or is there hotspots that you might get more questions from an area and it's causing more time to answer them?
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. And just before I bring Vlad in, if I may just add a supplementary, certainly at Area Committee, at Wigtonshire Area Committee, the question was asked, once the service plans are agreed, what would come back? And I think that would apply, if I'm correct, across all the service committee plans that we're being asked to approve today. But I'll come to Vlad to respond to your specifics there.
Thank you, Chair. We have thought long and hard in terms of some of the performance indicators here, whether we could disaggregate. I'm at, in essence, members' hands if there's any specific ones. The question I would ask for members is, what value would you get out of that, particularly bearing in mind the enabling type services in which we are involved with every other area, so for example social work, education, etc., and we are delivering a service to those services within those areas, not necessarily on a kind of region-wide. There are some areas, particular licensing, but then you've got the kind of different licensing panels. You will have one overall licensing board that also has those reported to that. So in members' hands if there's any specific ones that you wish for us to consider and then come back to you on.
I'll maybe come back to you, Councillor Hislop.
It's maybe a question that you should ask area committees what they want to see, because, you know, there's people on this committee, but it's not the actual members of the area committee, so it might be worthwhile taking a report there to say, right, here's the ones that are going, which ones do you want to see if we can, because I realise some might not be able to disaggregate, but some could, and might be worthwhile going there.
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. And I think just in terms of area committees, is the review of area committees still ongoing? So is that something that can maybe be captured as part of that?
Thank you, Chair. You've read my mind. That's the perfect route for that, and that's certainly one of the alternatives that are being proposed through that review, is in essence the ability for the area committee to have certain scrutinies that it would choose within that particular area committee, which allows the right officers to be there to answer those questions for future reporting.
Thank you. If I may ask a couple of questions myself, and then Councillor Thompson had indicated he may wish to come back. Questions I had was on page 134, reference freedom of information requests, and that was sitting at 90%. It was just, what is our legal requirement? Does that 90% fit within what we legally have to do under that freedom of information legislation? And the second point I had was in relation to the local government benchmarking framework indicators. Again, this would apply to all the service plans coming forward. Obviously, those are set nationally, but where would the feedback loop come back to us to know where we're sitting in the national picture of that? So are we doing better than average? Are we below average? You know, is there an opportunity for us as a committee to get that feedback on the national picture? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The second one, I don't know if my colleague Heather's here to speak to just more broadly in terms of the benchmarking, the local government benchmarking framework that you relate to, and that overall reporting. In terms of the percentage of freedom of information and environmental information regs, you'll see in essence we've got that target of 90%. However, you've got the 20 working days receipt, and that's where the legislation is and sits, and therefore if we fall foul of that, then we have to report it, and obviously that will fall within that kind of 90% that we're aiming in terms of our targets. As members will know, these are also reported through the audit risk and scrutiny, and you've got various challenges at times in terms of both FOIs, and actually it's not dissimilar to the kind of overall complaints processes that in essence we try and deal with them with the timescales, but from time to time, depending on the complexity, we might be over the timescale.
Thanks for that. I see we've got Heather on the call who's put her camera on, so thank you, Heather. Are you able to respond to the other question?
Yeah, no problem, and thanks very much for that. And just to advise that, yes, absolutely, as we bring the performance reports to committee, that will contain the detailed information that you look for the purposes of the service plan. What's in there is just the fact that those are things that we are measuring, but we share with members the full report on the LGBF, which shows our position relative to others, and indeed as the 6-monthly and the end of year performance reports come through committee, that will contain the information that compares us to other and gives you the trend analysis of how our performance has been over time.
That's really helpful, thank you. Councillor Thompson, I'll come to you to see if you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, for letting me back in. So it was a couple of points. One was on, well, it's really just, I suppose, the website, council website. There's two. There's new.dumgal.gov.uk and there's www.dumgal.gov.uk. They're both not necessarily connected. How come it's taken us so long to get a new website sorted out? Because it's a perennial point of complaint and has been for a number of years. So that's just, I'm sure there's quite a lot of narrative that will come back as a response to that. But it's just to tee that up. The other thing is, in terms of the EMS reporting, I think I asked this, and this obviously relates to this particular service area, but it'd be helpful to get a sense of the volume of inquiries and not just the percentages, so we get a sense of the scale and demand on the and requests in terms of service issues. And the other thing is just about, I think it's under business support on page 130. So there's an element there which is allowing customers to request finance tasks online, I suppose insofar as it relates to their particular account or business transactions with the council. And I'm just wondering how best to ask this, and happy to pick it up offline because it's maybe a wee bit involved, but it relates to the likes of, we have a number of, presumably instructions will come from relevant services to ask the finance team to raise invoices in terms of leases, payments, service level agreements, etc., to customers or clients of this council, whether they be community groups, tenants within our properties, etc. And it's really just to get a sense of how accurately do we cost code that information, so that if need be, if there was a query, the group or organisation or an elected member on their behalf could ask a question and say, can we just find out how much that that group has paid towards its bill, for example, or if there's a tenancy issue that we need to get sight of. So I don't know quite where it sits, but it's certainly an issue that comes into my inbox from community groups, etc., to do with leases, tenancies and whatnot. So happy to pick up offline, but thanks for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. There's quite a lot in there. I'll maybe turn to Vlad to respond where he can, and if it needs to be taken offline, we can follow up. But Vlad, I'll come to you for initial response.
Thank you, Chair. I think that latter one will maybe take that as an action for us to take that offline and have a bit more consideration on the actual request, just so I can get an understanding of that. But it sounds like kind of financial coding aligned to payments and so on from external parties. In terms of the website, we're on ongoing improvement, and again happy to give maybe just an update to members on that progress. We are taking one chunk at a time in terms of the website, and therefore that's the best, most efficient way that we've deemed it in terms of getting to the final outcome, and it's not going to be an overnight change to a brand new all functioning website. So probably best that those that are responsible for that may have that conversation in terms of that particular question as to where we're at with the website, but happy to release something to members on that comms front. In terms of the EMESs, Again, probably happy to get an overall briefing for members on the volume and so on, so that you've got the full picture rather than just simply the kind of percentages as it currently stands. But I'll need to get obviously the relevant teams in terms of feeding into that. So if you leave that with me, I can look into that.
Thank you for that. I've got the director looking to come in as well on that one.
Just to add to Vlad's comments on EMAS, so I think there had been reports through the Communities Committee formerly on EMAS, so I'll pick that up with the colleagues who administer that, which is currently sitting within the Economy and Infrastructure Service. So, you know, I'll take that away with Vlad, and we'll come back, because this is a feature of every service plan in terms of EMAS. In terms of the website and new web, members have had sight and agreed the digital plan, the transition as part of that between the old website and the new website. It is accelerating, and we mentioned earlier about the transition date by the end of May next year fully. In terms of the content, members have been kept abreast of updates directly on that in between the digital updates to committee, so we'll certainly bring another update in November in addition to any further follow-up directly. Councillor Thompson.
Hopefully that covers off the points there, and there's an assurance given for the action to take forward from Vlad as well. So does that help, Councillor Thompson?
It does. I think I appreciate the website. We've been given a date of May next year, I think it was, but it is remarkable, I think, just in terms of it seems unusual and slightly sort of, you know, anomalous that it's taken this long to get a website, basically. So I don't know if that's like benchmarked against anything, but it just seems to be, I appreciate we've taken an approach, and that's been before members. Maybe a lot of members don't rush to delve into how websites get done or whatever, but it seems to have taken an unusually long time, and I don't know if that's just common amongst our peers, but as I say, that's an observation. Thank you.
Again, I'll bring the director in just to respond. Thank you.
I'll try and respond, but I think a more detailed discussion offline I think has already been offered and will come. The website has many facets to it, not just the front of it, but the kind of development behind it, which I'm sure some members are more than au fait with. And we are working with industry experts around the timeline for this and services. So we've just moved a number of services online, including planning. But you know, that work has to happen alongside their day-to-day jobs, as well as putting in extra resources ourselves with technical support to do that. So there's complexity to it on a modular basis for each of the services, but we are looking towards that work being complete. And as I said, that was the timeline that we set out in initial stages. Appreciate the frustration if members feel we should be going quicker around that.
So I would just thank members for the debate. Just on that last comment, obviously we have got the digital strategy agreed, and we have got the service plan also on the agenda to come to. So again, it is useful if members have sight of all the strategies that we're working within that have been agreed in previous committees. So thank you, members, for those questions. I'm not seeing anybody else looking to come in. So the recommendations are being asked to agree. The Governance and Human Resources Service Plan for 24-25, with the comments that members have been made as well. So we're happy to agree those. Agreed? Thank you, everyone. Item 10 is the Assessor and Electoral Registration Officer Service Plan for 24-25, and this is presented for us here. Robert Neville is here to assist if members have any questions. So I will open it up to members' debate. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's not so much a question, it's maybe more just an observation, and I've raised it previously with Mr Clark, who isn't here today, but it's the age range of the staff. It would suggest there's 2 spikes within page 147 on the graph there, and we might lose a lot of staff, and we've got younger staff coming through. In the middle range there's not many. It's just for continuity. The other sort of services have a sort of flatter graph which shows age range across. Might not mean experience, I realise that they've got there, but it's just, you could lose a lot of people and then need to bring a lot of people in, whereas if in future, if we can work towards a kind of leveler graph, I think it'd be better for consistency and people coming through the system maybe.
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Robert, any comments on that one? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. We are aware of the age profile of the department, but we do have a number of trainee valuers coming through. We are running with a couple of vacancies. There was retirals earlier in the year. So in the fullness of time, and perhaps as a consequence of the planned service review in the short to medium term, hopefully that gap will be plugged.
Does that help?
It's just usually when you train your own ones up, if nobody else is doing it, they're off to other councils because they're short of staff when their ones go out. But it's just, you know, if you had a sort of evener line, you knew there was people there rather than train them up, 4 of them go away and then you're short of numbers. But I think that could be across a lot of services in the council.
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Yep, I've got the director looking to come in, but clearly there are recruitment and retention issues across a range of services right across Scotland. And as much as I think I've said before, I believe we are a completely unique local authority area. We're not unique in that terms, but I'll maybe just turn to the director. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add to Robert's answer there, this is not a kind of current issue with the assessor. It's been sort of the last 4 years, and part of the action that Robert and his colleagues have taken is to bring through the graduate apprenticeships. So we've been able to train a number of younger people who've come into the service as valuers in anticipation of that peak, the second peak as you've described, which is starting to sort of happen now in terms of some retireals. So we are ahead of the game. We've had a number of young people through training and a number more to come through and started with us. And speaking to other assessors and EROs, similar to things like planning, it's an issue across Scotland at the moment, particularly that skill set, but we've been very lucky to attract a number of young people into the service who've been training and getting support and are doing exceptionally well. So the team have been working on it for a while, but it is quite stark in terms of the number of people in the service. Is quite a small service relatively.
Hopefully that offers the reassurance. Thank you. I've got Councillor McFarlane's got his hand up online.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. In light of the increasing use of postal votes, can you tell me where we're dealing with that within this plan? Because it doesn't, it's not jumping out at me if it's there. And then secondly, on page 146, we've got an income of 2,668,000, I think. Can you tell me where that comes from? The fees and charges, what would they be in relation to electoral services, please? Thanks.
Robert.
Thank you. The fees predominantly come from sales of the register to credit reference agencies that we are obliged to sell under statute. A very small amount will be due to anyone purchasing the open register, as they're entitled to do, for a prescribed fee. And to answer your first question in relation to postal votes, it's certainly something that we can discuss with the newly appointed assessor and look to add an extra action in the plan for the future.
Does that help, Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, so in effect, we don't have, it hasn't been taken into account as yet, but we will do. Is that what we're saying? Yeah. Thank you.
I'll bring the director in who's wanting to add a comment.
So just by explanation, Councillor McFarlane, the kind of massive increase in postal votes occurred during COVID, largely around the Scottish Parliament election, given the kind of restrictions and shielding. A number of people applied there, so we've seen a massive increase in postal votes around that time. There has been a slight increase for the UK Parliament elections, but largely the large jump was around the Scottish Parliament elections. There are some remaining challenges around the divergence around postal vote registration for a postal vote between UK and Scottish processes, which are still under review. So that is there. So I think probably we will take a specific action away around an inclusion of further work, which is happening, but maybe to be more explicit about it, around the addressing the divergence issues and the continually and constantly emerging guidance around how to handle those as the electoral registration officer, if that's hopefully helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think if I may add a supplementary question onto that, I think it is an important point to look at where we are in terms of postal voters, etc. But actually, where are we with the number of residents that are registered to vote? That's not been captured as part of the measures or the service plan. And certainly I'm aware that previously our Youth Council was asking about how we can have automatic enrolment on the register, and where's that measure being captured? Because if it's not being captured in the service plan here, where is that work being taken forward to? And how can members have oversight as to where we are? I know it was raised, I think in full council, of a concern of people dropping off the register. So where is that due diligence and oversight coming from if it's not captured in this plan, or can we add that into the plan?
Yes is the short answer, but we'll endeavour to do that for the next committee meeting. These things are probably captured locally for us, in terms of a canvas plan, which is underway. So we do keep track of the electorate on a rolling basis, month to month. So we're always aware of the level of the electorate across the different constituencies and wards within D&G. But yes, to answer your initial question, we will get these actions formally identified and recorded for the plan going forward.
Thank you. That would certainly be helpful. When we're looking at the council-wide indicators and the targets and the time frequencies, I don't believe we would need an update monthly. I appreciate that that's captured, but if that can even come through as quarterly or 6 monthly, whatever is appropriate, and if we can get that added in, I think that would be helpful. But the director wanted to come in. Yeah.
I think just to add to Robert's comments, there's an annual canvas around electoral registration. So the cycle is, although people may come on and off the register at points in that time, the annual canvas is the point where we update the register and publish that and be able to kind of give you full confirmation of verified registered voters. So we can give you an update on the canvas progress as a project. Also on an annual basis, we can give you the total number of registered voters.
I think certainly that's helpful from my point of view, and obviously we are in the middle of the canvas right now. I had noticed that you only have 3 weeks to respond to that, and that's 3 weeks from the letter being published. So if there's a delay in the post, that gives a limited time. Obviously I did do it straight away online because that is the most efficient way, but it's just to ensure that we are not disenfranchising anyone. But I appreciate the comments and the responses. I'm not seeing anyone else with their hands up or any questions, so if we're happy to move to the recommendations, which is to note and agree the assessor and electoral registration officer service plan for 24-25. There's a slight typo on the recommendations, it says for the year 4. So we'll just make sure that that's been updated as well. But thank you. Moving on to item 11, this is the Customer and Digital Service Plan, and it's presented for the year 24-25. And we've got Mike Shepley here to assist if any members have any questions. So once again, I'll open up to member debate.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I brought this up at the pre-meeting. It's regarding telephone providers like BT and that who are taking away our house telephones. Now, house telephones work on a totally separate system. They work on 90 volts, so even if all your power in your house goes out, your telephone will still work. But if they take that away, I'm obviously thinking about social services and that, where people have to have a device in their house to say they need assistance, things like that. They all work on that system. I know alarm system, we had an alarm system as well, and if the cable was cut, it works, but it's all going to broadband. Now, broadband, not everybody's got broadband at the moment, but it looks as if these companies are wanting everybody to have broadband in their house. Because the problem is, if you don't have that, you won't have any connection at all. And if one of my colleagues said, if the power goes down, quite often you can lose that, and usually sometimes the mast goes down as well. But with wired telephones, this system could still run. So it's a very, very important, and I would ask if maybe you could write to the subscribers, like BT and other companies, as how they're going to overcome this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. I'll maybe come to Mike, but if I can just add in a point with your permission. I think one of the wider points that I had was about that digital exclusion and whether that needs to be captured in the risk register. I don't know whether capturing it in the risk register would be an option as well, because we need to identify what measures we're taking in place. But I'll maybe let you respond in response to the question about writing to the appropriate deliverer.
Okay, thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. With regards to BT provision, clearly you're aware of the move from one service platform to a broadband service platform, and the deadline for that, as stated previously, has been extended. Obviously, within the remit of my role and this council's role, it doesn't extend into the service provision, the domestic service provision. However, the point you raised there about vulnerable people being at risk, there is a project that is running nationwide around digital telecare. And obviously within that telecare provision already we have continuity arrangements through mobile telephony, as well as the normal domestic telephony framework. And that is, again, looking to be addressed further through the national programme, of which we, with our partners and we're working with the Scottish Government, are very much aware of the improvements that they're looking to make. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Slater, I'll come back to you, please.
Yes, thank you for that. But I just really don't know how they're going to do this. But it looks as if everybody will have to have broadband, which is hardwired into your house regarding electricity. If the electricity goes off, how do these other systems actually work? And that, to me, is very, very important. For people's lives could be at stake sometimes. So these telephone companies really need to come out and say how are they going to do that, because I say not everybody's in broadband, but it looks as if they're going to force everybody to probably do that. But if you have an iPad, it's good. But if you don't have broadband, you might as well throw it in the bin, because it won't work. It's as simple as that. So, and these other systems won't work either. So it's really a very, very important subject for many, many thousands of people in this country, that this system is tell how it's going to work before they actually start ripping people's phones out. Not literally, but taking their phones out of their house, because it all works in a separate system, as said previously. So although your house goes in, the power supply goes down right about, your telephone will still work. That's important for people's lives. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. So, noting the comments made about domestic provision not sitting within the remit of our role here, I'm aware that you did make a request for a letter to write to. Obviously, there was a response that that's not necessarily sitting with ourselves. I do note that there is a real issue about digital exclusion, and just to add to your comments, that's actually a national position that there's been concerns raised both at Scottish Government and local government as a whole as to what we're doing to ensure that there isn't digital exclusion for our communities, which is why my request is if we can add that on as part of the risk register, so we can then look at what mitigation we can do as a local authority. So I don't know if you're content with taking that forward as a response, but I'm also aware the Director wants to come in, so I'll turn to Lorna to maybe respond as well.
Thank you, Chair. You know, particularly our ability to influence partners. So this is a commercial operation and it's national infrastructure. So it is about influencing that, and we've taken away an action already to make contact with BT Openreach around the work in the region, some specific areas, but particularly to find out where their plans are, and we'll come back and give members a briefing on those matters in the round, and specifically as has been asked with camera as well.
Yes, thank you for that. But as I said, if they need to tell us if the power's going down, how they get round that system. That's very important, especially for like social services. A lot of people will have on-call situations, and these are very important. So these companies need to think about the vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater, and there's certainly a response and an action to take forward looking at that. I've got Councillor McFarlane online, and then Councillor Thompson has indicated wishing to speak, but Councillor McFarlane.
Thanks, Ken Chair. Yes, when I look at page 183, under income, we've got government grants of almost 30.8 million. Can we get a breakdown of that? Because clearly we discussed Borderlands earlier and the investment that we're putting in. It'd be really interesting to understand what money is coming in, where it's coming from, and what it's intended for. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Mike?
Did Councillor McFarlane say page 183?
Councillor McFarlane, yes. I think you're on the next report. I think you're on mute, but just to confirm, is your question relating to the next report?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, getting ahead of myself.
No problem. We will come back to you at that point. So there's a rehearsal for somebody to respond for the next item. Councillor Thompson, I'll come to you, and thank you, Councillor Stitt, for spotting that.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so okay, so I think we've raised the point about the website, so I think we have to wait another 8 months for customers to be able to benefit from the aspirations of this, which is working to ensure that everyone can benefit from digital information products and services, or in other words, to bridge the digital divide in an equal and equitable way, so no one will be left behind and endeavour to reach the furthest behind first. I think maybe touches on, that's just on page 160, it touches on a little bit about what Councillor Slater was saying, just about I suppose there'll be vulnerable people who maybe struggle to access the services, and certainly they're not ready to be accessed until May next year, I think we're hearing. So that's a whole winter away and a wee bit more. And I'm noticing on page 168 that we're accepting a target of our customer call abandonment rate of just shy of 20%, 17.5%. I don't think, I mean, I know we've had discussions about measures and targets at the New Economy and Infrastructure Committee, for example, but I'm not sure if we just need to have a measure, because I don't think that's the right type of target we should be setting if our aspiration is working to ensure, except I'm not going to read it all out again, it's a very long and awkward sentence, but if that's our aspiration, I think we should maybe raise our ambition levels a bit to actually say, no, we don't want any call abandonment rates, because that might be the difference between somebody who's having a phone changeover, for example, as Councillor Slater sort of pointed out a couple of times, and it might be the only way of getting in touch if they don't have broadband or whatever. So I think we maybe need to think about the customer, because I appreciate there's a bit of a staff focus on this as well, because it is internally looking at how we manage our resources and training, etc., to make our teams fit. But equally, all the while, all our customers need access to our services, and not just the number of visits to the website, for example, but the number of successful transactions might be a better measure, because we can have all the traffic we like, but if it doesn't achieve the outcome intended, then we've failed at something. So there's a couple of points there, maybe about the targets that we're trying to measure, what we're saying by setting those targets in terms of what our aspirations are, and I'm just wondering if we could be a bit more mindful of our customers or our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mike, I'll come to you, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'd like to pick up on the first point with regards to the web and the statement that our customers will have to wait for up to 8 months. Our customers are beginning to see improvements through the web design, such as the bulky uplifts process that's been put in place, which wasn't there before, and obviously the ability through the redesign of the new planning website as well gives greater potential for customers who require that service from the council. So there are benefits being realised, but obviously the full remit of benefits will not come until the conclusion of the project, and that's already been discussed. With regards to the targets, then clearly we continue to monitor those targets, and we'll bring our performance through committee, through the necessary reports. But I would like to give assurance to all elected members that absolutely we are undertaking a piece of work that is looking at our customer insights, our customer behaviours, and the changing needs and expectations of our customers. And that will continue to be reflected through not only the targets but the achievement against those targets on behalf of the council in delivering services to all our customers. Thank you, Chair.
Do you wish to come back, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, so it's just on the measures, and I appreciate, I'm not denying there's been some improvements along the way in terms of the web. I think it's long overdue, but I mean, there is progress being made. I'm just rueing the fact that a lot of the feedback I get from customers and citizens it doesn't reflect where we'd like to be, I think. So I've had numerous, I'm sure many members have had comments about the booking system for the waste recycling centres. That's been mixed feedback, let's say, but I understand why we're trying to do that. So, and there are other aspects where people just can't find the information because the search tool on the website doesn't work. So that's today and yesterday and a couple of years ago, and a lick of paint and a new shiny plan doesn't necessarily reflect the fact that our customers' experience of the website hasn't been great for a long time. So I appreciate we have to wait a bit longer, and there are some incremental improvements. But in terms of the measures, I think we should maybe be a bit more ambitious about call abandonment rate. And I'm just, that's, we could probably go through each of these line by line, but I'm not going to. But in terms of that one, I think we need to actually say, can we have that target at 0? And I'm sure there are other reasons, but I mean, let's be a bit more aspirational about making sure we reach all our vulnerable customers, starting with the most challenged first, if you like. So I think 17.5% doesn't say that to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Lorna, as Director, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just particularly on the call abandonment rate. So we do monitor this at a very, very detailed level, and a number of calls are abandoned within a couple of seconds of phoning the council, quite a high peak of them. Happy to share that data, and MECO has that information to be available to members. And that's the customer phoning and deciding they don't want to continue with their call. So quite a large number of those abandonment rates are at that point. So the council doesn't, in picking up the phone or answering the phone, in whatever technical way we do it, the customers almost kind of abandoned the call at that point. So there is no doubt that the number of customers are struggling to get through at times, and when we have peak periods as well, or there's an event or some issue, particularly council tax billing, those sorts of things, we gear up for quite a high volume of calls, and that can exacerbate things. And we do have some challenges, and have had some challenges, which we're continuing to address around areas of more specialist requests where people are looking to speak with, for instance, a benefits advisor or such. But happy to give you that more detailed information around the call contact centre, abandonment rates, and happy to take then further discussion on the level of targets as we come through the first report and give a much more detailed report to this committee around that. Happy to do that.
Final point, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, no, and sorry for coming back in again, but yeah, no, I appreciate that additional information which isn't in the report. So, I think there's, you know, are we measuring, and if so, why? If it's just like, well, it was a 2-second abandonment, doesn't really, I don't really know what that tells us. So why would it be the advertised measurement we want to promote in public? So I think there's maybe something about why are we measuring what we measure if not to improve service, etc. So if that's saying, yeah, 17.5% of call abandonment rate are actually cut-offs within 2 seconds because of unknown reasons, it's just a software issue, whatever, I don't know. But I mean, that doesn't tell me anything then in that effect. So I think, yeah, it'd be good to get that refinement of information. And as you say, Executive Director, if that's coming through, when we start getting the data, that might make more sense. But it's just to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think the assurances have been given that that will come back in the detailed report to committee. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I've maybe missed this, but what's the difference between customer call abandonment rate at 17.5 and maximum percentage of abandoned calls? What's the difference between those? Because one's at 17.5 and one's at 10%. Are they different? You know, I thought everybody who phones council is a customer, or is there some other reason?
I'll turn to Mike for the detail on that one.
I'm afraid I don't have the answer ready to hand, but I'm prepared to find that out later today and give you the exact detail behind that, Councillor. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that there's maybe not a response to that. We are being asked to agree this report, so subject to getting the detail back on there. Does that, I mean, obviously it's not an answer, Councillor Hislop, but are you okay to get that information followed up?
Just wondered if it was a typo or something that's been put in twice and at different rates, but if it comes back, I'm happy to agree the report if there's a difference in it. Yeah.
Thank you. I think if the detail can be shared with all members, but Mike, was there anything further you wanted to add?
I'll share that today with all members. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. I'm not seeing any other members with their hands up online or in the room, so if we're content to move to the recommendation, which is to agree the customer and digital service plan for 24-25 as set out in the report and appendix. Are we happy to agree? Councillor Thompson?
And can I just ask if we're recording some of the feedback as actions in terms of reviewing the measures, for example, because you know, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
We've got a note of those. Thank you. Members, I'm in your hands. I'm conscious it's 1:45. Some of us have been here since 9:30 with the seminar prior to the committee with only a 15-minute break. We've only got another service plan and 2 other substantive items. I'm in your hands. I'm happy to take a break if members would like, or we can carry on. So is there any indications whether we'd like to break for lunch just now? I'm seeing some nods in the room. Okay, so let's take a break just now. It's almost 1:45, so if we stop for half an hour and come back at 1:15. Thank you, members. Thank you, members, and welcome back. So we are on to item number 12 today, which is the Finance and Procurement Service Plan for 24-25, and the report is presented with Karen Scott here to assist any members should they have any questions. So I shall open up to member debate. Councillor Slater. No problem. We can make sure that we can maybe take that down. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair, and many thanks for the report. Can I first of all compliment the team on their risk register? It's one of the most comprehensive I've seen in a long time. Not surprising given the background of the folk that wrote it, absolutely amazing. Probably second to something done by health and safety experts, but really good and really comprehensive, so thank you for that. It's not a criticism, it's just a question in terms of page 185, flexible hybrid working. I'll let you get to the page. I totally understand why that's there and support, and the Labour Group support endorse it. But it's put into context with previous conversations at this committee in terms of constituents' perspective of folk answering calls. Now, it's a perspective, I'm not saying it's right, wrong and different, but it's something that's already been mentioned. And I'm not suggesting that we need more people in the office to do that work. And I totally understand that flexible hybrid working is better for a lot of our officers. It really, so get that. But how do we balance that perspective in terms of people aren't actually present in the office, which doesn't mean to say they're not doing their work at all. So I'm not saying that with a perspective, perhaps, that there's nobody around to answer the phone, or sometimes communicating is more challenging. Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Dorwood. I think the particular part in here recognises some of the benefits that we felt were missing as well, and moving to that hybrid approach, particularly around some of our staff development and learning from each other and sharing experiences as well. In relation to the comment and recognising and reflecting on the earlier discussion in this committee, we do ensure that we've got frontline services, so particularly our financial wellbeing team, for example. They are physically in that office at 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. We also, through our management team, monitor all requests for flexible working arrangements, and all of that is scrutinised through the full management team, not just the one responsible service manager, and all of those are put in place with manager reviews. There's none that have ever been authorised on an indefinite process, and that gives us the mechanisms we feel as a management team would require to allow us to ensure that the service needs are continuing to be met, particularly if we get additional requests come forward after an initial request has been approved.
Do you want to come back in again? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the answer, and that's reassuring. I think flexibility is reciprocal, isn't it? It works both ways, and that seems to be what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got Councillor McFarlane online, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'll now ask my premature question, and I apologise to Mike Shepley for causing him palpitations when he came up on camera. In page 183, you talk about the government grants that are coming in, and there's £30.8 million there. And I'd really appreciate a sort of breakdown of what those are, as I said earlier, especially in light of the comments that we've had in relation to Borderlands. And then on page 184, I see that we're a few people down. I'm wondering how that's affecting business, or are we getting more people into place for that and recruiting? Thanks.
Karen, I'll come to you first, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So in relation to the first question from page 183, with the government grant income, that predominantly relates to income received from DWP, which is then passed through, as you can see, in terms of the payments in the table above and expenses, which relates to housing benefits payments that are issued through the service. In relation to the second question, and the vacancies in post, those are out to recruit. We're not unique as a number of other service areas and professional areas have a number of challenges around that recruitment. So there have been some vacant posts that we are looking at alternative arrangements to try and grow our own talent pool to fill those, and looking at different mechanisms to make sure that that support's in place to get us to our normal headcount. I know from a procurement perspective, for example, the new structure that was agreed for implementation from the beginning of this calendar year has been progressed. However, we've had to adjust some of the posts and how they're filled, ensuring that there's appropriate and wider support given to allow the time for staff to develop into the permanent approved structure, just given some of the recruitment challenges that we face.
Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't quite pick up the first part of that in relation to the funding. You made mention to the table above it, but I'm looking at it just now and I still can't understand that. So could you just pass that by me again, please?
Of course, and apologies for the confusion. So within the table we have income which identifies the government grants at just below the 30.8 million figure that you referenced. As I said, that's receipt of payments predominantly in relation from DWP. The table above looks at our expenses, and there's a line specifically above expense total, which is transfer payments, which is a little over, which is the 33.2 million, which is incorporates that 30 million being passed back out in housing benefit payments.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. I'm not seeing any other hands up in the room or online, so if members are content... Oh, apologies, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks. Apologies for being late. It was just a wee question about cyber security risk. And I know it's obviously had a bit of profile lately, but I'm just conscious, I'm not sure if the two websites we currently have are hosted on different servers or the same server, but does it double the risk of a cyber security attack getting in through an old system and a new system, or is it just one risk? I mean, does it make a difference? And will it be reduced once the new system's fully operational in May? Thank you.
I'll come to the Director on that one, thanks.
Happy to give you an answer and circulate that to all members. Probably in terms of cyber security, it's not something I'll broadcast on in the meeting in a public forum, but certainly give you that detail, Councillor Thompson, and share it with other members.
Thank you. Okay, members, let's move to the recommendations then. So we're being asked to agree the Finance and Procurement Service Plan for 24-25 as set out in the report. Are we happy to agree? Thank you. Item 13 is establishing an ad hoc rates appeals subcommittee, and we're being asked to consider this for any future appeals in relation to non-domestic rates relief appeals. And I've got Lorna Campbell here to assist should there be any questions, and I'll open it up to members. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I know we've had elected member updates on this over the years from time to time about the likes of what would be eligible for discretionary relief and things like that, and what would or wouldn't fall into that sort of a thing. But it meets so rarely over the years, and I appreciate in times gone by we have as elected members chosen to award discretionary relief to certain enterprises, but I don't know how well those get reviewed or what the sort of periodicity of checking that is. So it's just really to get a sense of, in establishing it, will there be a kind of update to members saying, here's what we've got in our books now in terms of discretionary relief that is currently being applied and to be reviewed, or is it will that come out in the fullness of time once we've established this appropriately? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to Lorna first of all, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So the discretionary release we currently have are within the appendix within the policy. So these have already been agreed as part of our NDR rates relief. So the purpose of the subcommittee would be if there was any appeals against our application of either the mandatory or the discretionary reliefs, and the committee would need to consider that within the confines of the policy that's already been agreed. if members so choose and want to review the current discretionary reliefs that are available, that's something we would need to come back to committee, back to this committee, to look at the availability of reliefs and how we apply them.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Thompson? Thank you. Councillor Dorward, I'll come to you next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Discussed this in the Labour Group. We have no issues in principle with establishing another ad hoc subcommittee, but perhaps a wider question on this is perhaps not pertinent to this committee per se, but pertinent for general, as a general comment, is that we've restructured the council. We've got less service committees, but we seem to have more ad hoc committees popping up, which are not, they're there for a reason and they're right and proper. However, it's in terms of time management and timetabling, it's quite challenging for everybody, along with the increasing amount of seminars we have and additional committees and trustee work we do, everything that, you know, so it's not a complaint, it's not a problem. It's more about, can we, and again, as this committee, look to recommend to the appropriate committee, that we look to re-timetable or reconsider the recess periods for councillors. Not take them away completely, but look to reconsider how they work. I get that they're there for the benefit of paid staff and councillors. I don't know when they were introduced, and I'm not suggesting that we remove them, but we look at that in terms of workload for paid staff and councillors, because I note that the minute we come back from recess that there's a plethora of committees. I'm not complaining about that. I just think that in terms of workload for everybody concerned, it might be easier if we're talking about flexible hybrid working in our previous paper for paid staff. It might be useful to spread this out for everybody in the council. It allows everybody more time to, one, prepare reports and to consider reports for scrutiny. Just an idea, but I'm moving that we take that to the appropriate committee for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. I know that we have in the past looked to align recesses with school holidays within the region for both staff, and that was done several years ago, and I understand that perhaps it's full council that makes those decisions, but I'll come to the Director just to respond to the suggestion that you have made there in response.
I think that would, you know, indeed it would be a matter for full council, and just reflecting Councillor Hagman's points, I think particularly the recesses in October were introduced to align with school holidays at members' request, I think, for caring duties and other things. So happy to take that as a way as an action and speak with Vlad about it. I mean, I think Vlad's indicating, you know, something that can be discussed through various channels on an informal basis before we might bring it through a committee, whether that be leaders panel and business bureau, and with groups individually, if that's helpful. But we'll certainly take that away as an action. Can see Vlad indicating.
Yep, I'll bring Vlad in and then come back to yourself, Councillor Dorward. Vlad?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, the Executive Director's highlighted what I was going to suggest, which is probably best to be taking it through exactly those forums, Leaders Panel and Business Bureau, as a preliminary, and then thereafter, obviously, that can flow into any particular review of the timetable.
Thank you both. Councillor Dorward, are you happy with that response?
Yeah, it's perfectly acceptable. I think I'm not looking for anything radical, just a review of where we are, given that there seems to be more committee commitment from both paid staff and councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I don't see anybody indicating they wish to speak, so we'll move to the recommendations. So 2.1 is to agree to establish an ad hoc subcommittee as detailed in the report. Are we happy to agree? And 2.2 is to note the updates required to the Council's non-domestic rates relief policy as highlighted in the report. Are we happy to note that? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. And it was just in terms of the first items of business for the ad hoc committee, I'm conscious that in the actual appendices that detail the policy, It does set out timelines within which an organisation, for example, would have to reapply. So if we did grant, whether there was a discretionary relief or otherwise, there's time periods which would suggest that there will be a timeliness about the business that might come to that committee, given that some groups might need to then reapply for whatever relief they're currently getting, or not, as the case may be. So will we get sight of that in due course?
So we're being asked to note the update, but I'll maybe turn to the Director to confirm whether we'll get updates on the timelines.
In terms of the ad hoc subcommittee, it would be based on any organisation appealing a decision around the application of relief. So Lorna, I think I'll ask Lorna just to give an update on when we would know if an appeal had come in and what the timelines there, particularly in terms of a committee being convened.
Lorna, if I can come to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and the remit of the subcommittee would be about an appeal, and once we receive one, we would look to convene the actual committee to hear that appeal. But we would look at the timelines round about that. I'd have to say at this point in time we don't have any pending, so there's no an immediate one, to get the committee up and running. So we do have some time at the moment to actually, look at the establishment. And I think we said in the report about making sure members who were on that received, some training and awareness before that, the first committee. But yes, we're conscious of the timelines, and that would be fit in round about any appeal that we receive.
Are you content with that response, Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lorna. Okay, so we're happy to note the above as details in the report 2.2, and there's the additional action as requested looking at the recess periods and aligning council diaries. So are members content with that? Yep, thank you very much. So we will move on to, well, item 14 is any other business deemed urgent by the chair, and I've not been notified of any other business. And then we'll move on to item 15, which is the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do members agree to adopt the resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A, brackets 4, paragraphs 8 and 9 of part 1 of the Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973? Councillor Thompson.
I wondered, and I suppose members who've maybe got sight of the report already will obviously be a bit more appraised of the details within it, but I would say there might be a case that this is in the public interest, given the quite unusual nature of the commercial details in the report and the singular nature of them. So I'm just sort of wondering what the mood of the committee would be about that, but I'm happy to take advice on it. Thank you.
I'll maybe come to the Director first of all in terms of the rationale for it being taken in an exempt forum. Lorna?
Actually defer to the monitoring officer who's about to come on camera. Obviously there are reasons for the request for exclusion of the public, which Vlad and Nick would be able to set out.
Vlad, I see your cameras come on, so if I maybe come to you first, hopefully you can help us here.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As members will be aware from the report, there is quite sensitive commercial data within that, which is relating to contractual potential negotiations, depending on what the decision of members is at, and therefore that sensitive commercial information should absolutely not be in the public domain at this point. It may well be in due course once members take a position, but at this point in time this should be an exempt paper.
Thank you, Vlad. That's quite clear from your comments there. Councillor Thompson, does that address some of the concerns that you raised?
It does. I think I was maybe wondering about sometimes if we're considering a competitive contract, that might have its own considerations, and other times obviously there's the specific details that we might look at in terms of figures that might otherwise prejudice if they were public, how that then got taken forward. But I think it's obviously of interest because of the singular nature of the piece of business. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Carruthers online as well. I'll bring him in next, please.
Thanks so much, Chair. Stephen brings up an important point. It's how the minute may be reflected subject to the decision that's taken is my only query. So, say for instance, the council takes things in its own hands, I think is the best way to describe it. If that was the case, would then that report or minute be published in the public domain at that point? Thank you.
Vlad, I'll come back to you, if I may.
Yeah, the minute should, and I know that Nick's the governance officer today, but the minute should reflect in generic terms what the decision was, but will not obviously detail if there is any kind of contractual negotiating values that are then agreed by members today. So it depends on the decision, but in essence it will be recorded as a decision, and we have that custom and practice that we always report on the decision, but in generic terms.
Thank you, Vlad. Hopefully that offers some reassurance, Councillor Carruthers.
It does, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So are members content that we do adopt the resolution to exclude the public from the meeting? I'm seeing nods in the room. Okay, thank you. We'll just stop the recording there. Thank you very much.